Welcome to the Art of Succession podcast with Barrett Young. Join us as we explore the strategies, stories, and insights that shape the journey of leadership transitions and business success. No matter where you find yourself along the journey, this is the podcast where you'll find the tools to make it happen.
My attitude and position is this talent development, defining your future, is as important as your schoolwork. In other words, you don't have a choice. If they don't have a set of skills that match sort of their true personality, it's going to be a problem later on. So you got to get them out of that consumption mode and say, hey, if you want to keep going down this road, bring value to other people in that world.
Welcome back to part 2 of my discussion with Jonathan and Renee Harris. If you want to watch part 1 of our discussion where we get into the origins of the family business, you can find that linked right here. Otherwise, let's get back to the episode. I mean, you're getting kicked in the teeth by customers also as the owners of this business, and telling your kids, well, it's not good enough. You need to do better and get better client, customer response and everything. How do you navigate things like that where your customers just completely reject an experiment that you tried while you're also demonstrating to them, like, I've got to hold this together because they're watching me? How do you do things like that? Because it's so hard to come home and not bring that with you.
Right.
But then know how much to show them and how much I'm a real person too. And I suffer from some of these rejections too.
I think sometimes just sharing the good and the bad with the kids, like just the actual emails. And I mean, if it's something that the kid did with the business that affected the customer's reaction, then definitely they have to be in the know on that. But I think you're talking just in general, your two lives of business and parenting. I had a rough day yesterday and my girls got to see it. So it's part of that. And then I come back and say, you know what, this is all part of business. And we have to figure out the lesson we're going to learn. And then let's go figure out how to make it a better day, or just if anything, I feel like it helps. You can't avoid that. It's better that they see that. I think if we didn't allow the kids to see the good, we have to say the good too, because we really want our kids to go down this path. So if they only hear the complaints, and we've seen some second generation, entrepreneurs where they're like, well, I don't want to do what my parents did. It was a horrible upbringing. I don't want to impose that on my kids. That means you've only talked about the bad. And then that means you probably really, you didn't enjoy it, or you just talked about the bad side and you didn't talk about the successes. And for us, I mean, we definitely have our seasons. Like, we work really hard in October, November. We have to give up some things that we would rather not have to give up, but we have to, that's our busiest season. And then as soon as mid-December comes around, we get to totally celebrate. And even during the heavy, hard times, we're just bringing home fun stuff to eat, or have little celebrations, or, okay, we're going to just quit and have a movie night, or just any kind of way to celebrate the successes. You do that. And I will let my kids know. Usually I let them overhear me talking to Jonathan, like, oh, this happened, because you never know if they're paying attention, but often they are. So I will share an experience of what I had to deal with a customer. And then another time it might be a completely positive one. And if I sit them down and they're a late teenager and I'm telling them, oh, this customer said this, they're kind of looking at me like they could care less. But if I'm telling Jonathan and they're in the room, they get to,
they're spying.
They're spying. They hear it.
Yeah.
And we found if you whisper, they start listening.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. I lost my question on that. How do you deal with a kid? I'm sure out of 9 kids, and some of them were born into this at this point. How do you deal with a kid that's just like, this isn't my path? How do you deal with?
When you mean by this isn't, so let me.
They don't want to do it.
Question.
They don't. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When you're saying this is not my path, what do you think is going through their mind when they're saying that? Typically, when a person would say that, a teen would say that. Why? What is that path in their mind?
I don't know if it's comparison with their older siblings, or higher expectation, or they're just not interested in this. They just want to do Minecraft, or
okay, well, I actually have a short answer to that. Okay, because I just want, because there's 2 things here. One, I hear other parents say, well, they're worried about that path, meaning their specific path, right? So, yeah, you're a baker. I'm making this up here. and it's a family business, let's say. So if you're saying that path, typically when parents are saying that, not teens, but if parents are saying, oh, my kid doesn't want to go down that path, they mean literally, I don't know if my kid wants to become a baker. That's not what we're talking about here. So where they're finding their own path, whether it be baker, programmer, artist, musician, engineer, software developer, they're finding their own path, not our path, their path, but they're using our business to get down their path faster. So that's what we're turning on. Now, if a teen is saying that, so what I'm hearing the other side of the question, if a teenager is saying that and they're saying, I just want to, do Minecraft. Well, let me flip the question around. Could that teenager say, hey, I don't want to study history. I don't want to study math. I'm done. I'm just going to do Minecraft. There is no person in the world would say that that's acceptable. They would just not. You're going to either take a dumbed down version of the math class, or you're going to work on your multiplication tables. But there is no option in this universe where a parent's going to say, hey, you know what? Now that you don't want to go to school anymore and you're 14, you can just stay home and do Minecraft. It's not going to happen. And what's the reason? We're saying, well, because you need a minimum level of education, right or wrong. That's how we feel about it. And you're not going to tell. You might get tools to help them. Well, it's the same thing with their talent development. My attitude and position is this talent development of finding your future is as important as your schoolwork. In other words, you don't have a choice. So you better figure out what it is that you like doing. Now, it's not like they're cast out there adrift. This kid who's playing Minecraft, I also notice him. He's got other capabilities, right? I'm paying attention to him. I'm having a conversation. I genuinely do not believe that teens don't want to do anything. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think they turn in on themselves, start gnawing on their own bones. This is where you get that teen anxiety and so because they don't feel like they're good at anything. And I think that's what's going on. They don't feel like they're good at anything. Their hormones are going forward. They want to be noticed, and they want other people to like them for their genuine ability to bring value to people. I'm putting this in grown-up adults, but teen girls, teen boys are all the same as far as they want to be recognized, but they have different ways of doing that. And so when they're stuck just playing Minecraft and they're actually, clamping down on that, that means you haven't shown them a way to get started. And once you find that way, then it'll start waking up. But if they're like hooked on the equivalent of sugar instead of, great steak, you're going to have to cut back on the sugar. So we're not afraid to say, computer time comes off or whatever it is you're doing, that's not acceptable. But we are lenient in terms of them enjoying some of the just pure pleasure of their interest, as far as that's concerned. So we're not monsters. We're just saying, hey, if you really like, racing cars in this area, there's a lot of people like drag racing. We're not in that culture, but I know there are. If you like racing it, that's fine, but you're going to have to find a way to bring value to other people, maybe repairing their engines, right? Wouldn't that be awesome combination? We're not just going to fuel the cost of you drag racing with all the costs that come with it without you also producing something of value in that world. So that's kind of how we deal with that.
I gotcha. So, I mean, that does help with the comparison because it's easy for a kid to look at their sister and say, oh, I can't draw like that.
Oh,
I
yeah,
prefer,
right.
I prefer to read. You're saying it's your job as a parent to say, there's a way to read that brings value to other people. And you need to explore that hobby or that interest that you have, but it has to grow you into an adult that's productive, that's adding to society, is what you're saying here.
Yeah,
Not just
absolutely.
holding them all to, well, your oldest brother was a coder and he was awesome at this stage in our business, and you all need to learn how to code. You all need to learn how to draw. You all need to learn how to take photographs. You're
Right.
specifically tailoring that.
With our kids, some of them had very little participation in the business at all. And then others had a lot more participation, and it really depended on what their interest and skill set was. So if we had an opportunity for them to get better at something and they could quickly showcase it because we could use it, then we would. Like my youngest, she's 9. I have an app on my phone called InShot where you can just piece together all these different videos and photos and add sound effects and put words and everything. So I actually had her put something together for me. I said, okay, you're going to come with me on this video. The product that we have that also works well for kids. She and I were in the video and I was the one talking, but she was being her cute little self. And then I just put a couple different videos. And I said, okay, make this short. And she actually pieced it together. She put music to, I mean, it shows it was done by a kid. It's not a professional, but it was so well done. And she did it a lot faster than I could have. I told her, I'm going to use this. Actually, I'm going to post this on my Facebook, because it was good enough for me to actually post something like that. But even that just tiny example of somebody who is, she loves storytelling, acting, video taking, that kind of stuff. She's just this, none of our other kids have been quite the same in that way. And so just giving that little opportunity to put herself out there was worth it for her, because now she's going to grow up being used to doing that. And yeah, they don't all have, they don't.
Yeah, in that example, if we don't know what direction it's going to go, but you can imagine, right? What is it a lot of teen girls have, and teen boys too, but teen girls in particular, they're afraid of showing themselves because it becomes very self-aware of their looks in their teens. Well, what happens if you have a kid who's early on used to showing themselves on video appropriately, right? Appropriately with in that context, in the parent's business, you're teaching them boundaries. You're teaching them what you can and can't talk about, but you're also encouraging them. So you realize if you were to keep going down this path, by the time that child is a teenager, they're not going to have the same hangups that you would think an average teenager would, because they understand the boundaries of what you can and can't do and how to get positive feedback from people. And in this case, she's the reason why Renee felt comfortable doing this with her, our 9-year-old, is because she loves being the center of attention. She loves showing herself. We understood that. So that's why we didn't do it with our other kids.
Yeah.
But we understood that with her. So we gave her an opportunity. But by us doing that, we're not like sealing her fate that she's going to be a spokesperson for our business in the future. We don't really care one way or the other as far as that is concerned. But we do care that she gets a chance to sort of express herself in a way that brings value to other people.
And in her free time, she's already taking my phone and setting up her little stuffed animals and making these little stories. So I came into it saying, oh, she has a little skill. She knows how to use this app. She knows how to set up her little animals and then piece all these different videos and sound effects together. Why not just have her do it for me and see what she comes up with? And I didn't even have to use it. I didn't pay her. I was not about to say, hey, I need you to do this job. It was more like, try this out. I want to see what you can do because you're getting good at this. And then from that, it was something I could use. But it wasn't like I had to stop everything and go teach her. It was something that she was already interested in that. So I could hijack that into something that I wanted to do. And we put on a workshop a couple of days ago, and we had a mom in there who all of her girls are into dance. Like they do ballet, they do swing, jazz. It's like their family culture. I think they only have girls. Is all about going to all of these events to do dance. So they've already invested, I'm sure, a lot of money. If it's dance, I'm sure it's a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of practice. And so she was there because, well, what's that going to look like in the future? They've become very good at dancing, but now what? Is that going to be what they do full time, or is this a hobby? And Jonathan got them to talk about all the different other interests that they have. Like, we have a whole checklist of all the different kinds of other interests, not just dance, but what else do you have? And one of them was baking. So by the time we were done talking, we were able to come up with, okay, you need to bring value to your dance club. So how can you do that? Well, there's probably a big deal about having healthy snacks when they're out there dancing. It's not going to spill and leave a mess on their clothes. And you want to make sure that they eat before they go perform. So what's the ideal kind? So if it were our daughter, we would say, okay, you're going to do some research on this. It's got to be healthy. All these, and maybe brainstorm that with them. So what kind of, you can't do ice cream, obviously. It's going to melt. So you can't have that pre-done. So what kind of foods can you have that could be snacks that everybody would love too, but would also please the moms because it's healthy. It's not just sugar. It's not messy. It's amazing what a teenager can come up with when it's something that they already love. Well, they already love to do baking or be in the kitchen, and they love to dance. Is there a way to merge those two? And then you bring in, okay, this is important to us. We're already spending a lot of time and money doing these dance competitions. So now can we actually bring value to the dance, events and so on?
I know there are parents probably listening who their kids are already too late. They're already grown up. Or they're, late teens and hard to connect and hard to have serious conversations. Is it too late? How do you get started? What are some words of encouragement or recommendations or
Yeah, are you
just
talking
talk
about
about
if they're still young teens, or are you talking about when they're getting closer to
16,
graduating?
18, or
16 to 18. Is it too
Mhm.
late? Just throw them out there and
Well,
say,
there it is true that if there hasn't been any connection with their sort of, I don't, true skills is I don't want to say that, because skills are learned. But what I'm talking about, if they don't have a set of skills that match sort of their true personality, it's going to be a problem later on, right? So, people joke about, high school days were the best days ever. Well, the reason for that is because they were involved in developing very, very, advanced skills in an area that as soon as they leave high school, no one will want, right? So that's the reality. Everybody understands. Now, if you understand that, then you can treat it like a hobby and not take it too serious and develop stuff on the side. But a lot of times people lose sight of that. So they go into sort of doom loop. I'm I like playing the guitar. I'm doomed to become a starving artist. No, that's not the way to think about it. What you have to think of is, yes, I enjoy the guitar, but there's a lot of other things that go with it. And there's probably what appears to be a side skill related to it that might actually be better suited for what you want to do long term in terms of your personality and other resources. So what I would say is, when you're 17, 16, 17, 18, you're going to pivot outward. Maybe not the family is the way to look at it now, because you are competing against the possibility of making money at a fast food place, let's say, versus working on a skill that you really love because it's involved in the world you really want to be in. So how are you going to reconcile those two? So you have to really put your thinking hat. One advantage you have when you're that age, though, is you can get in your car and you can drive across town. And, in the beginning, maybe even volunteer. So what I really want to have people think about is, yes, McDonald's might pay more. In our area, it's In-N-Out Burger. Yes, they might pay more per hour. And if you're starving and you have no other option, then do that, of course. But if you could have another skill and maybe even paid less, but was building up, compounding your ability to make a living in the future, then do that instead. Because it's not just making the cash, it's also making the connections, the social connections in that world, developing the language, understanding the tools, and so forth. So at 16 or 17 or 18, you can really double down on that. But that's going to be much more on the teen owning that at that point. It is true that I think that's where, as an adult, you can make a big difference. You can really have an encouraging conversation. If not, teens do panic. First, it's carefree. Everything's great. Mom's, washing your clothes. They're picking you up after soccer. Dad's going to drive you on the weekend. All that fantasy is going to disappear suddenly when they graduate. And that's why I think there's a sense of despair that a lot of young adults have, to say, well, I've spent all this time, but it makes no sense to my future. You really don't want to be in that kind of situation. But I think if you have an honest conversation that's built around who they are, then you can say, hey, what would it look like to start being able to bring value to people in that arena? And we don't know necessarily that answer. We'll tell them, I don't know. Let's see if you can find out. And they start asking questions, maybe people who are already several years ahead of them. And they say, hey, a great way to get started is this. You're really into bicycling. You love bicycling. You're part of the high school team, and everything's paid for. And all of a sudden it comes to a big halt. Well, you could ask questions. It's like you find out the bicycle shop is making good money repairing, let's say, it's all the rage right now, the electric bikes. Well, it's not as glamorous up front, but you find out, what, I like repairing bikes. I'm in that world. The professionals come through, people who've got money. And so you're making money in that, let's say, shop environment, and you're staying close to the bicycles. So you could actually keep going down that road and still indulge in your desire to bicycle race. But you don't have this dichotomy. I was a big high school racer, and then all of a sudden, boom, it stops. Now I'm working double shifts at In-N-Out Burger. What happened? And you have to give up all those weekend, you fall behind and you disappear. So you have a hobby that just pretty much disappears as a dream in your childhood. And that's okay, but wouldn't it have been better? Could it have graduated to something serious? But you find a way to bring value to other people. So you got to get them out of that consumption mode and say, hey, if you want to keep going down this road, bring value to other people in that world, right? You're going to bump into people who love bicycles, You're going to be talking technique. You're going to be talking brand quality. Isn't that just wonderful? So I think that's what gets exciting. If you get the teens hooked onto that and get that conversation going, it can really change a feeling of hopelessness and despair to excitement and passion.
If a kid absolutely says that they want to do something and you don't feel as a parent that it aligns with who they are as a person, talk to me about when you bite your tongue and just let them fail to learn that lesson.
That sometimes is the best.
The best and the hardest,
Well, it
right?
depends.
Well, I mean, we don't, you don't let them take risks that are fatal, right? So
we had, a couple of different times, I feel like, it depends, because if it's a big deal, a big thing, then you obviously can't let them just, jump off a cliff. But a couple of little lessons that our kids have learned along the way is sometimes they'll want to, for example, they had something they wanted to sell to somebody, and that person happened to be in Brazil or something like that. And we had to, I'm just thinking of a time when we had to, do we let them just figure this out, that this could be a huge, and it was something they didn't get their money that they wanted for, or sometimes they'll.
Yeah, we did. I remember that. And our son was being a little bit stubborn and saying, I think this is a potential scam, but because they were having success selling to everybody else, and they couldn't imagine a world where adults would try to scam. That didn't when they were young enough. Now they're
better that they do that while they're still under your roof.
Yeah.
It just depends on the age and how, we wouldn't, at the same time, if one of our sons wanted to invest in something or go down a road that we thought was just going to be a train wreck and it's too big of a risk, then we would steer them away from that, or try to extract so you have some earlier success with it. What can we do first before deciding if that's the route to go?
Also, we make them pay for their tools.
Yeah.
So we don't buy their tools. So I think we have one kid who wanted to become a voice actor. There's a fun story behind that. And right away, he wanted us to buy like a several $1,000 microphone because he saw that advertised. We're like, no way. You can use my digital recorder that I use for work. And then he realized that he was making some money actually off of voice acting for commercials, right? Nothing big, but there's a lot of little side gigs like that, very small. And he enjoyed that. But you know what he enjoyed more? Because he found out that in order to apply, they wanted him to submit audition files. And he read up, of course, that these audition files needed to be extremely clean, right? So he got into this whole editing part. He had no idea he was interested in editing. He fell completely in love with it. And that editing allowed him to buy a much more expensive microphone later on. But he earned that. And he discovered along the way, I want to make more money to buy a tool. And so he had to figure out a way to do that. And one of them was podcast editing. Back in the early days, people were already starting to pay money for this. And he was like a squirrel on this thing. He has that kind of personality, and he still does this to this day. And he loved doing that, but that wasn't his original intention, but it was connected to voice acting and so forth. So we allowed our kids to experiment a bit that way. But one of the ways to do that is to make sure that they pay for it. Now, we might in the beginning sweeten the pot and help them get their first microphone. But after that, we're saying, okay, you want the next microphone? You bought one for $50, with your Christmas money. Fine. They want now the $1,000 one or the $500 one. And I was like, well, that would be nice, wouldn't it? What can we do to make money to get that? Meaning you make the money. Oops, sorry.
And I think another part of it is that the older kids, especially, because we had some that had a little bit of a slower movement that we thought, they should be able to get out there and make money or do something. They're taking their time. We start charging them rent if they're still home.
Well, that's when they're about ready to graduate.
Yeah, that's more at 18. But part of it is that if they didn't have an income and they're still at home, but they're still getting better at their craft, then they have to help us out at home, in one way or another with the business, whether or not it has to do with their interest or, since we homeschool, or we'll put them in charge of homeschooling in a particular topic that we know they're good at, or, something that's going to be valuable to the house. So, but by charging them rent early on when they are making money, then they're really motivated sometimes to just, okay, I can pay bills now, then I can live on my own. So I think.
Yeah, I forgot about that. We had one child the other kids weren't like that at all. They were very, they had high hopes. And but one child was really worried. It's like, they couldn't understand the money side of living on their own, so they were very scared. So I think one of the exercises I had this one teen do was sort of keep a log of what ask your friends how much does it cost to rent a room in our area. We knew what it was, and she had siblings. So say, ask your brothers. It was a girl. Ask your brothers what they're paying, and then ask them how much to live on their own. And then of course the brothers say, well, but if you go out and eat every day like we learned, it'll double or triple your price. All the teen boys went through. As soon as they left home, they indulged in all the junk food we told them not to. And it was like, what did they learn? And then like a year later, they realize, oh my goodness, we're getting overweight.
Then they end up eating
it's caught.
We do. Yeah.
They all become sort of gourmet cooks now at home, and they still might eat out. So you allow them some of that reality check, and the rent part. We noticed with the kids that were soon to graduate or had graduated that sometimes they got a little indulgent if now they're no longer doing their schoolwork or
helping around the
helping around the town because somehow they feel like they've graduated beyond the normal necessary means. So we're washing their dishes, doing their laundry, and we're like, oh, wait a second here. This is not how life works, So we kind of charge them a lower rent than they would if they were on their own. But it was an incentive. It's like, oh my goodness, if I'm going to pay mom and dad, this amount of money, then I might as well be out there, with roommates having a good time. And they want to do that anyway.
And also, if you feel like they're not making it to the next level, like they're kind of stuck, sometimes you have to think about, well, is the location that they live in, in our area, do they need to be launched out somewhere else to a bigger city? Like we're out kind of almost in the boonies where we are. We're not near, we're 2 hours north of Sacramento, but we're not in Sacramento. So for a couple of the kids, it was actually better for them to move to Sacramento just for friendships. They notice out here, it's like even their peers just kind of are just bumbling along, not really doing anything with their lives. So we just felt they need to be outside of the area, meet people that are a lot more dynamic, doing things that they can get excited about, and just make new friends and have more opportunities. And so sometimes that's where you have to kind of steer them like, hey, you know what, there's an opportunity over here a couple hours away. In one of our son's case, my brother lived there, so he moved in with my brother and his wife for a little bit. And just so they can get out of mom and dad's, especially because we homeschool. It's been us all the time. We're their teacher, the parent, their business owner, their everything. So even getting them out from under your roof also seems to help a lot too, for them to start to grow.
And boys are very eager to do that. So it's not not a bad situation. Sometimes there is anxiety to go further than they've ever gone before. But if you know who they are, and especially if you're talking about a very specific skill set, then you say, hey, it makes sense if you look. And by then they're also making friends in that field of work or that world. So they kind of know. So if you could say, hey, you know what? I have a friend or we can drive down there and check it out. So you can do things like that as a parent, sort of clear that way to get them going. Of course, there's always social dangers of any number of things, right? So you can share that with them and talk to people, and you can clear that. But that was a good one, Renee, because I forgot about that.
And sometimes it's just the peers they're around. Maybe it's who they hang out with. It's dragging them down. They need to get out of that. So we always thought, like, when we've had to steer our kids away from certain friendships, we said we have thought we have to replace it with something better then. So it's hard for kids to kind of say, what, you're not letting me go here or there, or hang out with this person, whatever. But if you can try to steer them into a new environment, that helps too.
Yeah, that's more of a delicate social.
Yeah.
Where I think also too is if you go down this road, your kids do become very advanced in a particular area of life, and sometimes that's an interesting social dynamic because you have kids like aspiration is, I don't know what I want to do in life, and they're thinking the next 10 years I'm going to work at a fast food place. I mean, that they're not hustling at all, and your kids are like going to overdrive. So there is sometimes some social disconnect going on. You might have to help your kids say, hey, maybe you need to go to this city over here where you're going to meet a lot more people like you who have already put in the hours, and that has helped. And
or just get used to hanging out with 30 get used to hanging out with 30 and 40-year-olds.
Well, and that is something we've always done with our kids. We haven't, because we homeschool, we could put them in different kids clubs. You know, we got the sewing club, or they could be in the sports or whatever. But we actually, for their different interests, we would actually put them in where the adults were. And we found that to be far better for them. And the adults always love having really enthusiastic kids that want to learn from them. So they have a skill set to pass on. But it wasn't always, I mean, they had friends their own age, of course, but when it came down to really getting good at the skill set, we just found it's just better to be around people who are super serious about what they're doing. And most of the time they're adults.
This has been such a great conversation with Jonathan and Renee Harris that I'm actually going to have to split this one into 3 parts. We have new episodes twice a month interviewing business owners with their own succession stories. If you're interested in being a guest on The Art of Succession, you can find the interview form linked down in the description below. We're going to pick up part 3 of our conversation. You can find that episode linked right here. If this has been beneficial for you, I'd ask that you please share it with someone else. And I want to thank you for watching The Art of Succession.